start with a nice, easy question. So who's in the room today? We want to know parents, teachers, staff members, community members, students. We'll just hold on here on this page until we get a green light from Stephen. We're good? To the internet. So now we want to ask the question of what feeder pattern do you live in? So Liberty High School feeder pattern, the Issaquah High School feeder pattern, Skyline, or even outside our district campus. Okay, so not surprising, we have people that live more in Liberty than in Skyline. So we are down here, so we. And then if you would spend a minute or two sharing, what do you hope to get from attending tonight? So what is it that you're here tonight to hear or to learn? What is it that brought you out here tonight? And we are glad that you are here, and people are watching at home this glad that they are participating as well. So we'll share. What do you hope to get from attending tonight? So we see an opportunity to share my concern. I would like to hear more about what our community is thinking about and considering. Support the school board and learn more about what they're doing. So it's hard to believe that we're using the same format as we did when we were in high school, just to be consistent. But it was hard to believe that it was 2 months ago that we did our first one. This was the end of September. But so now this is less about starting the school year. But the question was things that are going well as we start this school year. We're now 3 months into our school year, but 3 months in, what are the things that you have experienced, or you as a student, or your students, or a staff member, things that have gone well this year as we're 3 months into the year? We'd like to hear your perspective. So I see reconnecting to the community, learning learning and extracurricular activities. Seeing students back in classroom connecting with their friends in school. My student is very happy to be back in the building. COVID cases are very low. Schools have navigated challenges and obstacles to keep the schools open. Students are benefiting from the services in our school. Sports team made my incoming freshmen feel part of the Liberty community. COVID vaccine clinic. Okay, and then we want to sort of get a sense on where you were, where your head and hearts were at before the school year started. So what the concerns we had before we launched into this 2021-22 school. And it could be academic concerns, it could be COVID mitigation concerns, it could be related to any of those. What were the concerns that you had before the school year started? Either as a staff member, for your students, or community? So I see school shootings, worried there would be multiple quarantines, the transition from 8th to 9th grade. Keeping it open, which we have done. Thank you. Access to COVID testing. School funding. With COVID cases spike, as students' emotional well-being are back to school. It's getting back to quote normal. Lack of special school. And then now, if you would pivot to today, on November 30th, 3 months into our school year, what are ongoing concerns you continue to have? Access to COVID testing, recovery services for students without IEPs, number of fights in middle school, and lack of transparency about what is going on, keeping kids in the buildings, sex education for young children, student and teachers' mental health, way too much homework, shortage of staff, which isn't your fault, but it makes it hard on teachers and principals. I'm worried about their burnout rate. CRT type assignments being given in English and history classes. Protocol compliance. Disinformation that we are teaching CRT isn't true. So now this is the time we would like to open up and have you put into Menti questions you have for the school board that you would like answered tonight. And why we're doing this is because we want to be able to address as many of them as we possibly can. And once they are placed into this format, we're going to do our best to rank order them so we can make sure we get to as many of them as we possibly can. And so you guys in the room get to prioritize what it is that tonight. So if you would do that right now.
Can ask more than one question.
I think they should be able to.
If you do have troubles with Menti or the internet or don't have a phone, there's all of us are here that we can also.
That would be the question. And then the questions. And if it's like, oh, it's already, yeah, and it's like, oh, it's been already answered, then we're going to hear from our other format just because questions. Okay. So there are less people here tonight than there was at Issaquah High School, which makes it easier for us to go through. And so rather than before, if you were at Issaquah High School and I would take around the mic so someone would ask the question, here we're just gonna have someone read the question and then we'll answer the question. But I want to start here. You said that you didn't have a phone, so I wanted you to have an opportunity to ask the question. Sure. If you change your mind, just wave, and I will. Okay. So if if you guys want to keep putting questions into Menti, and if once we get through those, and then if there's more questions, we will go to the audience. But presuming that you're the audience putting the questions here in Menti, I will hand it off to.
Okay, so what qualities is each school board member looking for in the new superintendent? So why don't I just start down the line, since it's asking each of us individually.
Sure. I think for me, the most important parts, given that the superintendent's role is to be both the education, I think I heard you say, I love this phrase, being the educational and operational leader of the district. I'm looking for an individual who has demonstrated in a similar district, in an area that's had some of our challenges and figure out how to solve them, that they really can create a high academic achieving environment, as well as make sure we're running an operationally sound and fiscally strong district.
I would agree with a lot of that, all of that. Actually. I think for me, I'm also looking for somebody with a real past experience with strategic goal setting and strategic planning to really, that's one of the things that the board has used our policies, the way policy governance works, and I don't think we really described that, but maybe at some point we'll be able to, so that we've kind of leaned on our end statements rather than a strategic plan. And so I think I want to find a leader that can work through that and has been successful at putting together a strategic plan and seeing real growth and progress.
I can take all of those and I'll add in someone who is engaging with the community, whether that's of course staff, parents, families, the greater community, and is engaging with all of those groups, bringing together our community values and what we want out of our schools.
Okay, and again, I'm going to say everything I just heard is good. I would add somebody who is really excited about Issaquah, excited to be here, excited about the opportunities and the challenges, and somebody who's not afraid to be innovative. Like, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? What would happen if we did that? What would happen if we turned this whole curriculum upside down? And somebody who's not afraid to get in there and try some new things. But most of all, I think somebody who's really excited by the opportunity that is.
So agree with everything that was said. So for me, I think that it's one thing for our superintendent who must be responsible for leading the 3,000 plus employees. Yet I want to make sure that the focus is really on our students. And I think sometimes superintendents can get focused on leading their organization, which is organizational adults, but we exist to serve students. And I really want to make sure that that is at the forefront. And the other thing is our superintendent that we hire must be the chief faculty officer. So it starts and stops with our superintendent, and our current superintendent has been a huge proponent. That's where we are, and I want to make sure that that work continues. So,
Great, thank you. Why students that have symptoms of COVID aren't given COVID tests at school if needed? And I might need some clarification on this, because to my knowledge, if a kid is at school and has symptoms, they go to the nurse and they are COVID tested, or they can be if the parents desire it. So I don't know if the person who had that question has had a different experience, or maybe that was just not clear. Okay, so yeah, that superintendent is saying that's the first testing that we put in place. So that is happening. Okay, why is SEL now integrated in high school classes? This is according to the IHS vice principal.
I can say that's not, we will attempt, that's why we brought our superintendent, because it's really hard to describe what is in the purview of the board and what is in the purview of the superintendent who does the operational and that part of the leadership. So we'll let him, this is more of an operational question, so we'll ask
Yeah, well, what I can say is coming into this school year, there was an understanding that there was going to be a need for, and actually our OSPI plan that we had to submit last spring said we need to be considering the social emotional well-being of our students coming out of the shutdown. And so we already had an SEL curriculum in our district, we use second step curriculum K-8. There isn't a really good SEL curriculum at the secondary. And in fact, we've also used Character Strong at the middle school as well. But as far as integrating it in, it's a little, it's a little harder to just find standalone time to do a canned social emotional lesson. And some of those aren't so great at the secondary, as I said. So a lot of teachers have worked ways to integrate social emotional learning into their regular classroom practice. It doesn't mean that they're still not teaching U.S. history or French or whatever the class is. But I think a lot of this is just an acknowledgement that our students are in a different place than they were on March 13th, 2019 or 2020 when we closed the schools. So there's just been a greater emphasis across the board this year, and not just in the classroom setting, in the lunchrooms, on the playgrounds of our elementary schools, working with our students to make sure they are they're recovering.
Thank you. Roll this up so I'm starting here. It's like the screen change. I'm sorry. I am very concerned about the misinformation on Facebook about our district, staff, etc. Is there anything that can be done to stop the spread of misinformation? And the short answer is no. We are also very concerned. There are a lot of pages out there. People can say what they think. They have a First Amendment right to express themselves on social media. The main thing we can do is to say, if you want actual information about the Issaquah School District, go to the Facebook page that is titled the Issaquah School District. The other pages, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, can pretty much do what they want to do. There's some internal policing by the administrators or by other people in the group, but there are some groups who like their own echo chamber, and when somebody says, well, I don't think that's really true, they bump that person off. So I don't know if anybody has anything to add. There is not very much we can do. Sydney.
So where I would agree that there's not much we can do on misinformation any individual chooses to share. I think that there's many things that the district can and has done in the last 18 months as it's become more of a factor that has, I think, tamped down a lot of the misinformation. I think communications department has done a very nice job of being clear in what are approved communication channels, to your point, being consistent. When are we going to produce information? What is the format of that information? Taking feedback on what information is helpful, so people don't have a need to sort of churn and develop their own narratives. I think vehicles such as the summary of what happened at a school board meeting have been incredibly helpful to help tamp down that misinformation. I think we see significant less spike of they said they were going to do some outlandish thing after that because we're producing an accurate accounting of that after. So while again, we can't make sure that any individual who wants to start some, new idea that is not grounded in fact, we can and we have, I think, taken significant steps forward in ensuring that the channels of accurate information are clear.
And I would say, see something, say something. It's kind of you can be our support. If you see something, you're like shocked by it. This is not what I would expect in the Issaquah School District. It might not be true, or it might, maybe it is. But finding out, if you find out that it is in fact misinformation, I think it's much about how we talk to each other when we disagree is a bigger thing. And how can I say, I called the office and this is what they told me. So rather than being accusatory towards somebody who is spreading misinformation, doing it in a way that they're not going to kick you off their page, I think is probably one way. And then it's just, it's like I tell my kids when they were in school, you can't use Wikipedia because it's not necessarily true. You have to understand, is it a viable resource? And so when you're hearing something on Facebook, is it a viable resource? And then you base that off the people you know. And so if you know the person that's making a post and you think it's misinformation, that's a conversation you can have with them. Hey, where are you hearing this? And helping us to spread what you do know if you're getting it from the district. So I think you're right about being clear about these are the places you can find information from the district, and you are also welcome to always email the board, email the superintendent's office. We're here.
Principal.
What's that? Your principal. Yeah, it's always start at the closest to you. So start at your principal. Hey, is this really happening? Are you not COVID testing when the kids have got a sniffles, or has a temperature? What's going on? They're going to know, and then I think that's the best place is to go to the closest source that is a district employee.
Good, they did. Okay. Is there any policy in place to ensure homework is the same in all classes of the same subject? Example, one math class a chapter and a half ahead of another class and much more homework. Funnily enough, there is a school board policy. It's an executive limitation. I want to say it's 12, and it is around this exact topic. Now, at the moment, I'm going to say it's a little bit aspirational. We're still working with teachers and staff and principals to ensure that they think this is a good idea, because a lot of teachers do want autonomy of their own classes. But at our last board retreat, we spoke with Andrea McCormick, who's the executive director of high school, and she had just an incredible amount of enthusiasm about this exact topic and how well it is going in the high schools to get everybody on the same page. So it's not perfect. It is a work in process, but yes, there is a policy, and yes, we are definitely moving in that direction.
I would just say that it's very important to the board, and it was so important that's why we added crop policy last spring, the late spring. So it's not even been a year that it's been in policy, and so the implementation of that takes time, and the alignment work that takes time. So it's not just homework; it's a homework and grading policy that is in place to try and bring alignment across our buildings and across our district, so that the experience and expectation for a freshman English class at Liberty High School is the same as a freshman English class at China.
And at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter what high school you graduate from. You should have received the same instruction, the same education, assuming you took the same class.
And this was work that was actually started several years ago, and we've been piloting it. And then there was this thing, COVID, that completely took any initiatives off the table as we dealt with that. And so I am excited to see that by board action, I think spurred that on to say, this is probably the primary thing that we need to focus in on for students. It's equity across our school districts, across the district when it comes to making sure that we are ensuring all students are getting the opportunity to get all the things.
What will you do to help with the misinformation out there, which includes sex ed hyperbole, CRT, again, not a thing, and incorrect data about our curriculum? Who wants to jump in on that?
I think, I think for me, we probably need to have some information sessions for the board. And again, when the board doesn't work, it's in public. And I love the fact that now you can find our board meetings on YouTube. You can watch them at your convenience. Because I think we need to really have a discussion that's available to the public around this. Because it is a concern across the nation. What is CRT? What are you doing in your school? What is happening with sex ed? I heard this horror story of something that happened for these other students. Is this happening in our schools? And the board has the same concerns. We have our board policy around equity is very clear about wanting to have a welcoming and inclusive environment for every student. And so I think there are discussions about what critical race theory is. By the way, I should have said that out loud. What is CRT, critical race theory? What is that? And how does that impact our students? And what are parents' concerns around that?
I would just add to that, that I think the specific point to illustrate what you're saying is we did have a full session on the sex ed curriculum in open session. We went through that in detail. What is included, at what ages does it start? We probably spent a good 45 minutes. We could figure out what meeting that was to demystify exactly what is happening. And certainly give pointers to where the curriculum is publicly available and how it is enacted here in the ISD. So I think that was a really good example, and if folks are genuinely concerned, that is a bit of our open meetings that we spent a fair amount of time going through in detail, and I think that would help relieve concerns on the topic.
I think too, as far as sex ed, mostly encouraging parents to reach out to the teachers of that level where it's being taught and speak to them. And all the curriculum is available for them to look at, so that they can make an informed about what is right for their child.
Yeah, okay. Do board members agree with eliminating superintendent applicants that are white? No. I don't think that would be illegal. That would be legal even if we wanted to. And no, the board has no preconceived notions about respect for any other characteristics. Not sure where that came from. Maybe one of the two. There was a shooting at Oxford High School in Michigan today. What new precautions are you doing to prevent our children from dying in a school shooting? I can start that one. We do have acronyms right. We did have school resource officers in all of our high schools, and those are commissioned police officers who have a presence in high school. A couple of our jurisdictions have been unable to provide those people to us, and we have replaced them or are in the process of replacing them with school security officers who have pretty much the same qualifications other than the fact that they are not commissioned police officers and they do not carry a firearm. We have security officers in all of our middle schools. Yeah, we will. And there is some coverage of those people in our elementary school. We have quite a lot of work that has happened between the police departments and the fire departments with regard to our schools in terms of the maps of our schools. All of the classrooms are numbered from the outside. If you ever drive by a school, wonder what all those big numbers are. That's so if an intruder is identified in classroom 112, the police who are responding know exactly where that classroom is. So there's quite a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in terms of keeping our kids safe. This is probably something we could talk about for hours. We have the executive director of school safety and security who manages all of this, and that's a relatively new position, I would say the last 3 years. So this is definitely something that is always at the forefront of our thoughts. And there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
I would add that, and we won't share everything that we do because we do work closely with first responders. But we've also, if you've noticed, we've put vestibule entryways into all of our schools. That was something that we have done out of our bond and capital levy proceeds, where so it's like a second layer before you can get into a building. You might be familiar with your neighborhood school. You might have seen additional fencing. I mean, I hate to use the term, but we kind of hardened the campuses a bit over the last 5 or 6 years with vestibule entries, additional fencing, also with increased cameras. We have hundreds of security cameras around the system. So there's been physical things and then the procedural things that President Weaver talked about. We have more security staff than we've ever had in the system. We have 2 vehicles so they can respond to any school. We have 2 rovers. One of them is our director of security, who's a retired King County Sheriff as well. And so every school has emergency plans, practice drills. We've upgraded our walkie-talkie system, which is actually really an important thing. So we don't lose our ability to communicate sometimes. It's shooting, yes, but we also have to be prepared for earthquakes and other disasters.
And I will just add, because this comes up all the time when we have lockdowns at a school and parents are, well, I didn't find out about the lockdown until 20 minutes after it happened, and I didn't know if my kid was in danger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason that that happens is because when there is a scary situation, everybody's focus is on keeping the kids safe and making sure if there is an intruder or if there is a threat, that that threat is handled. The administrators are working with the police, and communication is important, but it happens after kids are kept safe. So the next time you wonder why you didn't hear about a lockdown until a half hour later, that's why. It's because everybody was focused on keeping their kids safe first and foremost.
And I'll add, and those are all the things that are happening in our building. But I think we're also doing a lot of social emotional with our students, and that helps the students feel adjusted. The school experience, we've done a lot of work to help keep kids engaged. The anti-bullying, I know, empathy, help identify kids that might need extra help. And so I think that is important for kids to be happy, comfortable, engaged in schools. Also, that can be very important.
I was gonna say, and to add on to that is the mental health counselors that, I thank you to the public for your support of our levy, because that is funded out of our levies that we're able to have the number of mental health counselors. And if you have had a student that has needed mental health, if you've had any family member, behavioral health specialists are in short order right now. And you can find yourself on a waiting list. And so we are thankful that the community has passed those levies and allowed us to be able to send those resources on mental health counselors that are actually in the building. The students can connect with them right away. And that I think has been really important. So it is very much about trying to get on the front end and meeting students where they meet. And that goes back to the basis of wanting to have a warm, welcoming, inviting environment for students. Every student should walk through that door knowing that there's an adult in the building that cares for them. And that's really where a lot of that nurturing happens. And our staff is working very diligently at getting to that place. And, I've heard stories in some of our buildings where they'll put kids' faces up there. Well, they'll ask adults to put stickers so that they can identify which of those kids don't have as many tattoos as them. So that there's not as many adults that are taking this. Those type of programs, getting kids to connect first of all, that will the place up safe. And I think those things are important.
Will there be more vaccine clinic dates? I know that we are working with Costco to try to schedule those.
We don't have a date yet, but Costco is open to the idea on Saturday in December.
So I will say that Ann and I both volunteered at the first round, and we're going to be volunteering again tomorrow. And it was really exciting. I think, what did you say, was it 22 vaccines delivered, 2,200? 2,300 vaccines delivered, first shots, and now they're all coming back for number 2. And I'm not going to say there weren't any tears, but there were a whole lot of really excited parents. So if we can continue to provide that opportunity for families, we certainly will. Costco, as you can imagine, has been inundated with requests, but they have been an outstanding partner, and they have provided a lot of really wonderful, empathetic people to give those shots. Because as you can imagine, there were some 5-year-olds that weren't really too sure this was a good thing. what is going to be done about the physical altercations that are happening much more frequently? And I think there was another question somewhere that was very similar to this. And people have already talked a lot about the social emotional learning and the mental health counselors and the supports that we are trying to provide kids. It is a tough time right now. There is a lot of adjustment for kids who haven't been in school for 18 months, trying to come back and remember how to do school and remember how to be social. There have been a number of incidents. Each one has been a little bit different. And of course, we can't totally talk about them and what was done without violating student parent confidentiality. But it's certainly something that we are aware of. We are working with families. We are working
No, I mean, again, we are seeing, or we certainly were, it's gotten better. As our teachers and staff have reinforced our behavioral expectations, which is the normal routine. But remember, many of our kids came back, and where we've noticed this has been mostly at the middle level. And that shouldn't surprise us either as a middle school principal. That is typically where you'll have more physical application. High school, certainly elementary school. But we have seen some of that in our students that came back, just they're not as able to regulate their behavior. But we're also noticing, and I can see this from the decline in it's getting to it's returning more to normal. But we did, especially in the beginning, we had fairly extreme behaviors on some of the students. We've seen some extreme behaviors on the part of staff and parents as well. This is all kind of fall up, I think, from the COVID shutdown.
And, you know, Ron said something that I was just going to add too. This has been difficult for all of us, and I think all of us are operating on that. So we're still at that sort of higher anxiety that we're going through life. And, you know, we keep talking about, oh, isn't it great we're back to normal? And I sort of think we have to stop saying, because we are not normal. It's better than it was last year, but we're still not operating at normal. And I think it's important that we remember that and that we work with our kids so that they understand, right? This is still a very stressful time. I don't know if anybody
I was speaking, I had some students speaking, I was on the board of the Inclusive Choice and now executive director, and we had some students talking about this. Was their biggest concern going back to school was I haven't been around people, and when I was, it was one or two, and I don't have the social stamina. And so I think that's what you're seeing is just not having the social stamina. I think many of us as adults were able to get closer back to normal because we had a history to look back to. But young people didn't have as much history to go back to. They lost 18 months of their lives, and depending on how old they are, that's a big chunk of their time. And so, especially if they were already struggling in school or already struggling socially, it just made things that much worse. So I think that's why things like the social emotional learning, it really is right now. Our kids have experienced the trauma that we as adults don't necessarily know how to guide them. So that's the work that we're doing.
Those are their basic needs. We need to deal with that.
Okay, what are the requirements in the search for a superintendent the school board is stipulating? I think we talked at the beginning about some of the things we wanted to see. We are also very interested in what the community is looking for, so I'll just remind you that there is a thought exchange that's open until a week at least. And if you go on the school district, next week, Tuesday at 11 p.m. Thank you, Leisha. I knew it was at least through this week. If you go on the district homepage, there's a link that you can click. You can either provide input or you can skip that part and simply rank other people's input. So it's kind of a fun thing to do, and the board will be looking at that very carefully, I assure you. What is being done about the bathroom TikTok situation?
I think TikTok moved on to something else,
Yeah,
didn't it?
that
Yeah,
was
I
pretty
think they
early in the
did.
school year.
Yeah, I think that's
That craze is
yesterday's
over.
problem. It was a kind of a weird thing. We did have some vandalism. It was handled, it was taken care of. I believe TikTok has moved on. This is one of those things that the schools do what they can, but a lot of this is also talking to your kids and make sure that just because they read something on TikTok doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea. What items are on your checklist for deciding on a superintendent? I think we visited that one. Homework is extreme this year. My sophomore has 3 to 4 hours of homework every night. Assignments are being given over breaks, long weekends. This is ridiculous. This is feedback that you should be giving to your teachers and your principal. I know that there is some guidance that they're not supposed to give assignments over breaks, but sometimes what happens is there will be an assignment, and if you need more time, you can work on it over break. And if you procrastinate, things will get in the way, and suddenly they do have work over break. So I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. That is something that varies from kid to kid. A teacher will give an assignment that they think is going to take a half an hour, and one kid will do it in 15 minutes, and one kid will do it in 3 hours. And so if your kid is truly struggling with that kind of load, I would say provide some feedback to your teachers.
We're also hearing this from this is kind of the COVID mitigation. How do you make up for 18 months of lost work? And so it is really do have a conversation with your teacher or your principal. If you've had a conversation with the teacher and it doesn't seem to be getting, you can't talk to the principal. Really say what is getting down to the basics that's necessary. But I do think that teaching and learning is really trying to work with staff. But we did have staff members saying, you know, I teach 6th grade math and kids are coming in and they don't know their fractions yet. And so they're, you know, if you think of trying to teach 6th grade math and your kids ended halfway through 4th grade and they may not have really learned much of the subject in the past year. That's some of the struggle right now of going back. So I definitely have those conversations with what your student is experiencing and have conversations with the teacher. Because it's very much my kid, both of my kids could not get homework done for the life of them. I remember he was in kindergarten, he was having 4 hours of homework a night because he had to bring home everything that he didn't get done during the week. So I know that struggle and it's painful. And so that's why having your personal conversation with your child's teacher is really important.
Okay, when will the school board election seat that's still not finalized be finalized? And I do know the answer to this question, but I'm going to give it to Ann.
King County said that the election and recount will be certified on Monday, December 6th.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that you were actually watching the recount today.
I was, and there was no change in the vote count. And it'll be officially certified on Monday, December 6th.
At what point will masking be made optional? The governor says so.
The Department of Health
Department of Health, sorry.
determines this.
Is there anything with that? That's pretty much a Department of Health thing, right?
Right now, we have masks with the Department of Health says that.
The Omicron variant has unknown transmissibility. What new strategies are you going to employ to support staff to help with compliance of protocols? And I am going to say what's in the MOU and what we've been saying for the last year and a half, which is we follow all the guidelines from the Department of Health. So if the Department of Health changes their recommendations about what we should be doing, we will change it. And
I would just say, we don't see it being necessarily different than Delta so far. Do I expect us to have a similar impact as Delta? Potentially. The benefit is in King County with a 90% vaccination rate. We're seeing decline despite activity increase. So I think in King County in particular, I don't think we're going to see the impact here locally that we may see in our surrounding region or state. That being said, I would say we go beyond the DOH. So DOH says you must do these things. Test to stay is optional. And our district superintendent and his team has implemented this across the district so that students who are potentially exposed to asymptomatic test and still continue to be in person because in person is best for both academic and social. learning. So I think we do much more than just the baseline expectation.
How will you address the difference in experiences students and families have based on the schools they attend? Yeah, we did kind of talk about that with our policy around homework and grading. I don't know if anybody has anything else they want to add to that. Given the questions on CRT and sex education, is there a list of textbooks to be used as well as the curriculum that is available to the parents? And I believe that is on the website.
You can get all of it on the website if they look up Flash and like sexual health, all available at all grades, all curriculum, all material.
When there's a requirement for HIV/AIDS and for Flash, that we do parent previews, and when we send out the information advertising the parent preview nights, we include the link to the curriculum. It's all on the website.
And I would say that also about if your English class, what books are in the reading, all of that stuff is available. We are a public agency, which means that information is public. So you should be able to access that.
Okay, well, what more questions are showing up here that I haven't seen before? Explain how the Skyline Assembly at the beginning of the year was considered an anti-police promotion by many parents. I do not know anything about this.
Is there someone who can give us more?
Is there someone in the audience that wants to give us background on this? Because okay. Why do we need to run a levy this year? Many people are very.
But I mean, it's fair to say, we're not aware of any anti-police anything. As we've gone through, is a very detailed working relationship with all of our local police entities. So I would put that in the list of just incorrect.
Many people are very unhappy with the district right now, and I feel like the timing is really bad and it has a high probability of failing. Why not wait until next year? I think the answer to why not wait until next year is that the existing levies expire at the end of 2022. Now, we are going to have a discussion at our next school board meeting about there's only 4 opportunities to run a levy there: February, April, August, and November. The ship has kind of sailed for February because there's still the levy committee has its first meeting on Thursday. So February is really soon. We are going to have a discussion at our meeting next Thursday about what should the timing be. Should it be April? Should it be August? Should it be November? If we were to wait until 2023, we would have an approximately $50 million hole in our budget. And that would be a very ugly thing and would result in curtailing a lot of programs, eliminating a lot of staff, doing a lot of things we really don't want to do, all the things that we've been talking about with social emotional learning, mental health counselors, even sports and extracurriculars, all of that's funded out of the EP&O levy. So we do need to run it in 2022, or we will have a major hole in the budget. Now, is it going to be April? Is it going to be August? Is it going to be November? Stay tuned for that conversation. My daughter is in 8th grade at IMS. She was given a very sexually explicit poem to read and annotate. A lot of parents called the school board and organized a protest to bring attention to this. What are you doing to prevent this type of teaching in something? I am aware of what happened at IMS. That was an assignment that the teacher came up with. It was not a part of the curriculum. That teacher is no longer with the district. What are you doing to prevent this type of teaching?
It's challenging if somebody goes. The interesting thing about that, if it's the thing that I think we're discussing here, it actually existed on the teacher website. canvas page for like 5 weeks before it was ever brought to me. I thought that was interesting. When it was brought to our attention, then it was correct. It was not appropriate. The principal, nobody signed off on it. And as far as, we have contract language about ephemeral materials because teachers will, you don't want to say you can't use anything that hasn't been a complete vetting process because things happen. That would mean we couldn't talk about the Delta variant because it hadn't been vetted. So we've got to allow people to use some ephemeral materials. Of course, we hope that they would use good professional judgment. And there's a lot in the collective bargaining agreement about that, and the teacher conduct, and all of those things. But occasionally people do something that you don't want to do. That would be-
Okay, why aren't parents informed of the psychological profile testing given to all sixth graders? We're talking
I'm assuming
I-
it's talking about SDQ,
SDQ.
and all parents are getting notification leading up to it and when it actually goes out. So
That's correct. It is a sixth grade parent that I received it.
So that may be a question of, you do get a lot of information from the school district, and sometimes things get buried and lost, and we try to prioritize things in e-news and things like that, but the information did go out.
And that's actually by law. If you're going to do a survey such as that, if you're going to do the Healthy Youth Survey, it is required, we are required to notify you. We can't just start quizzing your kid or doing questionnaires every day kind of thing. without notifying you.
I would add for any parent that wants to opt their child out of it, if you miss that opportunity for the first one, then be proactive. You can communicate with the principal and find out when the next offering is so that you can ensure that you will find the right moment to opt your child out of it.
Elementary safety patrol. Is there a way to create a safety patrol program across the elementary schools? The patrol coordinators are not trained or brought to collaborate, and unification across the board would be beneficial for student safety. That's an operational question. A school board question.
Yeah, and I know we have safety patrols. I mean, it sounds like this individual has probably some intimate knowledge about maybe that child who did it. So, I don't know. That's good input. I would have to ask our executive director of elementary school in terms of the concept of a unified safety patrol. I know Dave Montable would love something. Our director of safety.
Here, an opportunity for this.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you have been at Liberty for very long, or not too long ago, Officer Montalvo was the school resource officer for for 13.
At what point will the board put a stop to teachers promoting a person's sexual preference, whether it be gay pride lessons or staff wearing inclusive buttons pins? This does not belong in school.
I mean, I think the base question is, this gets back to what is the role of the board and how do we govern, which is the ends for students and operation there's I don't know that we will be with operational directive on what pins people wear.
Yeah, there's actual limits to what you can actually even make political on their person. Yeah. You can prevent them from putting a campaign on. Now, unless they were teaching a unit on campaign, but in terms of, the goal is always, I'm a former social worker, is teach the content and not the person. But I don't know, and I guess, I'm not familiar with anything like what I consider right there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. This is the first time in all my years being here, 21 years.
COVID mitigation, outdoor lunch seating for elementary. The windstorms claimed the lives of many canopy tents. Are you considering other options for outdoor seating as we head into winter? That is again more operational than
Yeah.
school board. I am sorry for the lives of those tents.
Yeah, and I mean, that has been a challenge for us. And I've seen better tenting jobs than others. There was a real struggle to get them early on in the fall. I mean, some of our places didn't get them. One of our middle schools got their tents like 2 days before the windstorm took it out. But as far as additional, like building permanent outdoor and, we're all hoping this is a temporary condition, kind of back to one of the earlier questions. When can we mask, when can we eliminate some of these other COVID mitigation? That is in fact a COVID mitigation. We don't have to live with forever. So at this point, we don't have plans to expand outdoor dining opportunities beyond the tents and really trying to get better tents and a better job of securing.
Is it appropriate for high schoolers being told they have to state their pronouns when introducing themselves? Assume that that's a classroom teacher.
There's no requirement. I mean, there, like you said, there may have been a teacher in a class.
I'm going to say that that is the sort of thing that very possibly is being initiated by students rather than staff. I'm going to go out on a limb on that, but that would not surprise me.
I would also say that there are changes, just changes happening in our culture. And it kind of goes back to the question 2 questions ago is, things are different. And I know in the corporate world, when I was at an organization that did a lot of work with city and a lot of nonprofits, it is very, very common that in every meeting, introducing yourself, you let somebody know what your preferred pronouns are, as a matter of giving them the respect in case they're wondering. And because things are different than when I was in high school. And so these are things that when they get into the corporate world, they may have to, those may be things that they're being asked to do. The same with if somebody has something, whether it's a pin or they make a statement that is not something that you agree with. How do we live together when we have things, when we think different? And I think that needs to really, build those skills to be able to say, what is it you believe? Why do you believe that? And if you come across somebody who doesn't believe like you, how do you live within that? Because we will always face people who do not think the way you think. No one on the board here thinks alike. So we have to know, how can we work together? And I think that that's a really important lesson to learn, especially once you're in high school. You're that much closer. And I think in colleges, they're very much going to be learning how to ask about pronouns. It's something that for kids is really important.
And I would just add to that, I think there's maybe some controversial bit to this question, but I think there's a very practical one, which is when I do my day job often, which is around solutions for people with disabilities. And actually most frequently where we get involved in the announcement of who you are, your pronouns, your physical attributes, is about being inclusive in a meeting environment for those who may have some form of disability, whether that be low vision or something else. So there's a number of reasons and a number of scenarios where things like this really aren't about some controversial social issue. It's about a practicality of execution.
Well, and I know I appreciate it when it's in an email. Because as we become a more diverse community, I don't necessarily know when somebody sends us an email. I may not know the appropriate back to them.
Okay, so I know that we've got about 15, 20 minutes left. We'll be down to our last 4 questions. Are you all considering a one-to-one tech plan for students in the future? The ISD is one of the most wealthy districts out there, and this hasn't happened yet. two pieces to that question. Are you considering a one-to-one tech plan? Yes, it's already being piloted in the middle school, and I am sure there's going to be a discussion, conversation at the levy committee meeting, because one of those levies is a technology and capital levy, and that is where we would fund it. Be careful about the ISD is one of the wealthiest districts out there. We are wealthy in terms of per capita income. We are not especially wealthy in terms of funding from the state. And unless we want to go out and, have a cookie drive to fund one-to-one computers, we really have to deal with the money the state gives us and what we're allowed to raise in our levy. So
The one-to-one technology would be through the levy, so that is not funded by the state, and our only other revenue source for that is through the types of levies we were talking about that we get back in our capital tax. We would need the support of our community to do it.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this isn't just something that hasn't been considered. So in the last levy conversation, the levy committee is staffed by many types of community members. They come together. So it's the community having a voice in what would go into that levy, representing the fuller or the larger community. And in the last levy, as I understand it, you'll correct me, this idea of a one-to-one was floated. I don't know how many before that. And it was not brought forward by that levy committee. So it isn't just, hey, why haven't we thought about it yet? It's absolutely been floated. It's been brought forward, decided last time it was not within what the community valued and not brought forward. We will do that process again.
One difference is you're exactly right in your history of that story. But the one difference is this time the district is including it in our spring work. So that is a slight shift from where we were 4 years ago. A lot of that is obviously driven by our experience. So I'm anticipating a good, and the board has had fairly robust conversations about one. Because there's a lot of different ways we can do it.
And I would just say, as a board member, I'm not convinced, and I'm going to have to be convinced that it's going to drive additional educational value. Because one thing, I want to make sure that every student has access to technology, and certainly from an equity standpoint, we can do that without implementing one-to-one. So we want to make sure our students have access to Wi-Fi at home and have access to computers, and we support students and families in that way today. But what I need to be shown is that having a computer in their hands is really going to drive a better educational outcome. Because if those things aren't connected, then I don't see the point.
I think the important thing is it's one thing to have access to it. It's another thing to have it integrated so that teachers are prepared to use it. I remember when my son was in freshman, the Issaquah School Foundation was funding something they called Start Strong. And so for about 50 kids, and they were given a computer, a laptop. Well, my son had access to a laptop, so it was nice to have that, but the teacher hadn't integrated it into any. So they might have had one or two people with a laptop, but you couldn't actually pull it out and be utilized in the classroom. So we also have to get to the point where once we do a one-to-one, if that's what we choose to do, or if it's a bring your own technology, whatever it is, that it gets integrated into the room so that all students have access to a robust learning.
If I could touch on the second part of the question just a little bit, because you did talk about it, but this idea of us being a wealthy district, we really do need to correct that narrative. We were the lowest funded public school district in the state of Washington for decades. The McCleary ruling helped bring us up to the middle. I will tell you, though, that the recent federal ESSER dollars that came out put us back down to the bottom again. So while we have, and we are very fortunate to have a lot of people in our community, that doesn't make us a public school district. Funding for public schools is driven more towards poverty areas, as it should. But by that very formula, that doesn't mean that we're a wealthy district. So we do have to rely on our legislation to support us. So I've heard that a lot, and I hear that from my peers out there because they think, oh, Issaquah, East King County, you guys don't have any problems. The fact of the matter is there are thousands of kids in East King County that live in poverty or very close to poverty. And I worry about that because I believe they get hidden behind a lot of factors. It's something politically we've had to battle my entire career.
But we are advocating for our students and families, and that's why even today we had a meeting with legislators, and we had one last month, and we've sent 3 letters which we published on our website. So we're actively communicating with both our county and our state, so they are well aware of what the needs are for our students and families.
And for those of you who are not living and breathing this every day like our superintendent is, the ESSER dollars, and I can't even tell you what the acronym stands for, but they're basically COVID mitigation dollars that are coming from the federal government. And those were allocated totally on a poverty level. So we have one of the lowest free and reduced lunch rates in the state. So we got very little of those ESSER dollars. Now, some of that makes sense from the standpoint that if you're a poverty district, you're probably going to spend a lot more money bringing your kids back up to levels that probably have pandemic. But from the standpoint of the testing that we've had to put in place, and the kind of supervisors we've had to put in place, and the plexiglass things that we've had to install, and
Mass contact tracing.
mass contact tracing, and the fact that we continue to pay our bus drivers health benefits so they wouldn't all quit and we could still operate a bus system and kids going back to school. All of those expenses, Issaquah had the same way all the other districts had, but we didn't get reimbursed for it. So it is a major problem. We don't like extreme poverty, but the ESSER thing was really hard on our district. And I'm sort of segueing into this next question because some of the answer to this question is about money. How are you planning to support the teachers throughout this year? Teaching during this school year is insanely difficult, and I, an elementary specialist, leave work each day exhausted and beat down. The teacher burnout rate is only going to rise. This is a very real problem. I would love to solve it by reducing class sizes and adding teacher aides and paraprofessionals and things like that. I would love to tell all of the teachers and the staff that we really do appreciate them and we know how hard this has been. But other than that last point, all of those other things cost a lot of money. So up to you guys if you want to add.
I was going to say, so, to really speak to this, we're spending down our reserves. So normally we hold a rainy day fund, if you will, so that it kind of helps when we go out for bonds, and it's good to have a certain amount in there, and we're spending that down this year. So in essence, we can't, it's something that we can't continue to do. So we'd love to hire more staff. We are just not able to at this time. And so that's why we're working with the legislature to ensure that we can get dollars that will really meet our needs, so that we can do that. The other thing right now is just finding workers. And so that because people are not coming to work at schools, people are not coming to work at restaurants, we can look at supply chain issues that we've seen in the news. And so that's a real issue as well. And unfortunately, how does Amazon get people to work there? Well, they're offering bonuses. They're paying, people at Target and at your grocery store way more than the minimum wage. And so it costs money to attract people. And so that's, again, more things that we're dealing with when we're actually spending money from our reserves for this year.
We are so grateful for our staff, and we know that it's a hard year. I know with my job, a day job, I feel the same way with all of information came out. It was just heartbreaking to think about because we're just so psychologically fragile. Education has had the same impact of the pandemic. So we in as few ways as we possibly can. We want to get out there. And I know at least for our elementary colleagues, we plan on going and doing listening sessions by feeder patterns, so we can really hear what the needs and priorities are. So at least our superintendent and his team can do as much as they possibly can as they can.
Okay, my kid got behind from last year's learning from home on Zoom. What resources are you providing for these kids to catch up? She doesn't have the foundation to move forward to higher math. It's going to cost us $7,000 for outside tutoring. We do have recovery plans in place. I know teachers are currently doing a lot of testing. I would say if you have specific issues on that, you want to be working with your Chinese teacher. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to say something.
I can add something operationally. I mean, just today we were, and this is an ongoing thing that happens, and it's happening in school districts all around. As one, you're correct, we've now collected a good bit of data on the students so we have a clearer picture of where they are individually and where they are as a class, and so that we can start to target. So today we talked about, don't have to go out and spend your own money on a private tutor, much more robust summer school. I mean, we lost time. We need to add time to get the kids back to where we would like them to be. And it's going to take us time to do it. We recognize that we're going to have to work on this problem. Obviously, for all of this year, all of next summer, probably all of the year before we start to see the recovery. We know that it happens. That probably the best study we have is New Orleans and because their schools were shut down for a long period of time. And actually, the data tells us that once the recovery efforts got started, they did a pretty good job. But the struggle, again, I hate to be a broken record, we have a spectacularly robust plan for summer. It's also very, very expensive. It would be, if I had $80 million in ESSER funds, as I was sharing with some of the board members before, I've had 3 or 4 different plans brought forward for after school support, summer school support, extended interim sessions during vacations. It all costs a lot of money. And also say we're deficit spending right now. We're on track to deficit spend $17 million. That's why we are fighting so hard to get these estimates so we can put more of these things in place for ours. But we have plans in place. The other struggle we're having right now is also hearing kids are feeling overworked. So for me to say to a 12-year-old, you're behind in math, I need you to stay after school every day this week and do more math, and then stay during your vacation and do more math. So we have to gauge it a little bit. I don't think we can recover a year's worth of loss. We've only been in school 62 days. So we're going to have to be a little patient with it, but there are plans in place. And we have some great partners as well. We're getting more and more of our PTSA volunteers in to help us. Our foundation that is helping us as well. So now we just need the federal government and the state government to step up recovery and drive more of those. We're not the only district in this, though. There's about 20 of us in the state. And, as Dr. Gallagher said, we were in a meeting today with the district, just helping them see what the problem is. Because they're hearing from lots of organizations, not just they're hearing from hospitals and everybody, but we have to tell our story so that people know there's some challenges.
And this is why I go back to, we are not back to normal yet. Our kids are struggling, our staff is struggling, our families are struggling. We know we're trying to work with it. We know we're not going to fix it overnight. This is hard.
I also say that, especially when you're in the secondary, in some of those classes, if you only need 3 math classes, if it's appropriate, have that person take the class that they took last year. There's no reason that, have that discussion again with your teacher or with your principal. What's really going to be best for your student? Because this does concern me, is that we can't, not when we said we went back to normal, and we shoved your kids back into school as if nothing happened. And maybe taking Algebra 1 again is the appropriate thing to do. And supportive of them. as a culture, as a community, to say it's okay if your fifth grader isn't ready for sixth grade next year. And, you know, the pandemic, they're just not going to be there. I think we need to be open to things like that. And I don't know that the superintendent may disagree with me, but I think culturally, we need to be okay if that's what it takes for your student to succeed.
And yet we are on the last question. Whoops, Carla doesn't make that. There was something about testing, psychological testing. Okay, going back to the psychological profile testing, is that really happening and why? And I heard a volunteer to answer.
I'll start. So in middle schools, and I don't know if it's high school, but they do the strengths difficulties questionnaire. And the point is for them to learn and get a sense from themselves and for their staff to also know, are they an internalizer or externalizer as they manage and navigate through stress and emotion. I think it's really important for all students to learn and know that about themselves. It's part of what aligns with our social emotional learning. And part of that is building agency in yourself on recognition and how to manage and navigate that. And navigate and manage and deal with your emotions. And how to know when you have to help. And it allows our staff to know how do they best engage with and identify who needs help and when.
Because it's the multi-tiered systems of support. So depending on the responses, your student may fall into a 1, 2, or 3 tier, which then we can really look at guiding what kind of supports are best for that student. And it is really about wrapping around and helping that student to you know, be able to challenges of school.
We want to normalize mental health as part of just normal growth and development. That's the stigma of it. And that's really important. That's why we've invested in Levy dollars with Swedish mental health counselor every one of our secondary schools. So this is part of that.
And so I pulled up the email that I received on this topic, just the parent email, and it's beautifully well. But I think it's important to note that in the initial email was shared that parents would be receiving the scores of their students who indicate highly internalized stress, so that a plan can be made. So I think it's important to understand that parents get included in that cycle as well.
We've got one more thing coming. I want to thank everybody for taking 90 minutes out of their day to come talk with us. We hear a lot about people coming and giving public input, and the board does not respond. So this is your opportunity to hear the board respond probably a lot more than you ever did. We do thank you for making the effort to come out here. We will be around if you want to ask questions, but I know Harlan's got one more thing.
Yep. We like to end this just to capture if there's any thoughts that didn't get addressed already through this, and we answered every question that was posted up there. But if you had other topics that you wanted as we look forward to this, you know, I think as a board, we've done 2 of these in the fall, and I think we're going to explore like how do we integrate the home audience. And the really difficult thing is we try, if you put in our perspective, is how do we make sure that the home audience doesn't overwhelm or take over from what the people who take the effort to be here. And navigate that balance is what we're trying to strike a balance here. So if you have suggestions of or other items to talk about, that would be great. And then there's one last slide, which is just sort of feedback on tonight's meeting. So I don't see any generated at this point. So I will go back to this slide and leave it on the slide after we conclude. That way, if you have those, but I do want to give a moment. You know, part of what we want to do is to do this work better, and community engagement is near and dear to the board. It's admittedly difficult when we have 19,000 students and 26 schools and 110 square miles to cover, but we're going to do the best we can. Launch the thought exchange in order to get community feedback, broad-based community feedback for us for tonight's meeting on what you liked about it, what you thought you would improve, how you think it could be better, or some sort of future hybrid type format. We are all
So we'll leave that open and let you make comments, but otherwise I'm going to conclude the meeting. And so obviously that will be to go away, but we're happy to chat with people. If you want to chat. Again, thank you so much for coming. We really